Have you ever found yourself doing a trial or a raid, and then someone's told you something along the lines of, bait the Earthshaker and then stand in the tower, and then when you actually go to do the mechanic, there's just a circle on the ground? Well, that's what I want to talk about in this video. In Final Fantasy XIV, while every fight has its own new mechanics, sometimes those are just older mechanics under a new coat of paint. The indicator might be different, or the debuff it gives might be a vulnerability down instead of a damage down, but for the most part, it's still a similar mechanic to a previous fight, and because of that, people have started referring to mechanics by their old names instead of the new names. Which causes you to have a lot of situations like this, where people are referring to things as towers when there might not actually be a tower on the indicator. So I've made a list of some of the more common ones, which I'm going to go through to give you an idea of what people mean when they use these names. So I'll start with towers because I already mentioned them. Towers are named from their original appearance as this: a circle with a single tower poking out. Over time they have taken on different appearances, some of which don't even have a tower in them, but since they function the same way, they're still referred to as towers. This mechanic is done by having someone stand in the AoE when it goes off, or else it will do raid-wide damage or add a debuff. There's also different versions of it in some fights. Sometimes they might require 2 or more people to be in them. Usually there is always some form of indicator for this, either by some markers on the tower AoE telling you how many people you need, or it changing colour when enough people are inside it. This mechanic is also sometimes known as meteors, but I don't know about everyone else, but I really don't like calling this mechanic meteors because there's a few other mechanics also referred to as meteors, which I'm about to talk about. So the next mechanic is called meteors. Just kidding. The next mechanic are proximity AoEs. These are also referred to as meteors sometimes, which is one of the reasons why I don't like calling any of these mechanics meteors. It's much easier just to refer to them as proximity AoEs or proxy AoEs. This will be indicated with a small solid circle that pulses out a bunch of blinking circles that move outwards like so. The solid circle is the point of impact for the attack, and the closer you are to the middle, the more it'll hurt, so try to stay as far away from it as you can. There's also a version of this mechanic that makes the name Meteor make more sense. In this version, it'll be an extremely hard-hitting proximity AoE, one that's going to wipe you out regardless of how far away you get. These ones will usually have you stand behind something like a rock to block the line of sight from the impact. That way you'll take no damage. Then there's Flare. Flare is used for this indicator. It's 3 white arrows that form a triangle around the player. It'll deal a set amount of damage to the targeted player, but will then act as a proximity AoE for everyone else around them. Sometimes there might be more than one of these, so you need to position correctly so the proximity effects don't overlap and take out the party. Stack AoE is most of the time indicated as a ring, both arrows pointing inwards. This indicates that the damage from this AoE needs to be shared between party members, so hop on in. Sometimes you might also see this as a stack line. This means there's going to be a beam aimed at that direction and everyone needs to split the damage between them in a line. Donut AoEs are simply a big AoE with a small circle in the middle that's safe, like a donut. And then there's chasing AoEs. These will target a player and start dropping AoEs at their location on a small delay. The player targeted will need to keep moving away from the group so the AoEs don't hit anyone. For tanks, they have to worry about tank busters. These are very hard hitting attacks on whoever currently holds aggro. These will usually require some form of mitigation or immediate healing. There's also going to be cleaves. Cleaves are a conal attack in front of the boss, sometimes given without warning, mixed in amongst boss's auto attacks. If fights have cleaves, you should only have the main take up the front so no one else takes unnecessary damage. Knockback and draw-in effects are moves the boss will use to pull or push you in a certain direction. Usually you'll need to position yourself in a certain spot so that you'll get pulled or pushed into the right location. Other times you might have to use your anti-knockback skills, arm's length or shortcast. Jail will lock a party member up, so you'll need to break them out by destroying the prison they're in. It'll usually be like a rock or something. PROTEAN is a baited conal AoE. There's a few different versions of this mechanic. I believe it's named after the protein wave from the living liquid fight back in Alexander. Back here the boss will target a random party member with a cone attack, so to handle this you'd have to have set positions around the boss to give yourself enough room to dodge the attack. These days it's used for pretty much any targeted conal attack like this. Most of the time these might even be undodgeable. Here's a few examples. See how there's a thinner line cone that will hit the person that's targeting, but just barely miss the person next to them. These ones are known as clock positions because you'll each want to have one clock position around the boss. This way, when it targets you, you won't hit anyone else. Other versions might just be it hits whoever's closest to the boss. And similar to Protean, you have Earthshaker. This is a kernel AoE that's targeted at certain players. They'll be telegraphed in advance on usually at least 2 players, maybe more, and they'll have to aim these away from the party. Pyretic or Dice will punish you for doing anything, moving, casting, or even auto-attacking. There are versions that will do damage to you for each move you take while the debuff is on you, and then there are ones like the Dice variant which will have a countdown. Once that countdown hits 0, if you're doing anything, you'll get hit. For Dice ones, you can get away with doing stuff right up till the last second. Prey will indicate to you which player is going to be targeted by the next attack. The marker for this by default is like a red crosshair like this one. Sometimes it might end up being something different depending on what fight it is. A lot of the time, you'll be able to pass this on to someone else by having them walk over you to pick it up. Other times it might just be telling you that you're the person who's going to be targeted by a certain mechanic and that you're going to be in charge of fixing it. Now tethers can be a lot of different things. I'm going to cover the more common ones here. Some tethers are simply just to tell you that you're going to be targeted by an attack. Other times they might be prey tethers instead. And similar to prey, someone else can pick these up from you. Usually this time it's by walking through the tether. Usually if a tether is grabbable, it'll be blinking with a sort of a dotted line effect across it. And then when it's solid, that usually means you can't pick it up. I don't know for sure, but a part of me wants to say there are some older fights where the thinner ones are grabbable. I might be wrong here, but keep an eye out when doing old fights just in case. But for the most part, blinking ones are grabbable and solid ones are not. There's also proximity tethers. These will have like arrows along them, and they'll become purple when you get further away from whoever you're tethered to. Basically just walk away till the tether changes colour to avoid taking extra damage. Chains is another tether based mechanic. This will usually chain 2 players together. As you can see here, the tether looks a bit like a chain, that's why we call it that. Walking far enough away from your partner will break the chain. This can go one of 2 different ways. Some fights will want you to walk away from your chained partner so that the chain breaks. Other fights will want you to stay close to your partner because do not break the chain or your life will end. In these situations, breaking the chain will do massive damage to everyone and probably wipe the party. The way you can usually tell if you want to break a chain or don't want to break a chain is to check if you and your partner are taking random damage over time. This could be a good indicator that the chain's a bad thing and you want to break it. But if there's nothing negative really happening, maybe keep the chains together just to be safe. Now, glare or gaze is going to be a very common one you'll run into. This is indicated with a large eye. You will need to physically turn away from the indicator to avoid being hit with the attack and debuff. Usually it'll be like a stun or a petrification or something. Sometimes there may be an AoE or cone indicator along with this ability. This usually means that those in the area are at risk and need to look away, while those who aren't in the AoE can look at the thing just fine. And finally, I want to talk about the duty action mechanic. This will be in certain fights, and you can see this like HUD element here that will have like a sort of extra ability. You can click on it to use it, or you can bind it to a hotkey in the keybinds menu. This is basically just an extra ability that you're going to need for certain mechanics in the fight. Now hopefully that will help with understanding what other players are talking about when they try to explain mechanics by using the old names of older mechanics. I hope I managed to cover whatever ones might have been giving you issues in the past, but if not, feel free to comment below and I can explain what mechanic it is there. Thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.